a handout for you, which is a summary of the story. And I had hoped I could read it to you, but I don't think we'll get that far. So let me just go over a few things you should know. First of all, anything I give back to you, you can get bonus points for if you correct it. So some of the things I use for coding on what I want you to do, like I might put INC. And what that means is it's just an incomplete sentence. So if you turn in a report and next to it I have INC, then if you have it on your computer, you can just change it to a sentence. Most of the time when you, or I might even put FRAG, which means this is just a fragment. So let's say for the knight, instead of saying the knight loved chivalry, you might say loved chivalry. Okay, that's not a sentence. So there are some assignments that I say, just give me the information. I don't care if you do it PowerPoint format or whether you do it in sentences. Sometimes on quizzes and assignments, I say use complete sentences. So on larger assignments, I give 2 grades. One is contents. Did you give me the information I was looking for? Do you know what you need to know factually? And the other one is grammar, style, format, things like that. Are you writing at a level that I consider college level? You know, that's what this class is for, is to bring you up to college level. I want to help you in anything that you write that is supposed to follow some format, to be sure it's at that level. Also, sometimes I use an AWK, and that just means this is awkward. A lot of times it just means the sentence goes on for, 4 or 5 merged sentences, they're run-on sentences. So anytime I give you back something, if I write something, what I notice, some people just don't pay any attention. They just say, oh, well, I got a 85, good enough. But spend some time with it, because I wish I had time to really teach you grammar, but this is the way I do it. I give you assignments in which I try to give you suggestions to improve your grammar. Also, circled words and stuff. Be sure you check the spelling of them. So this is, again, the 3rd week of a term. So by this coming weekend, we need to put together our grades. So either today or in the morning, I might catch you before you leave physics. I will give back everything I have graded. I got about 30 more papers this morning, so I'll grade like crazy. Some people just gave me stuff, and give you as much as I can. So if you turn in on Wednesday your Bible folder and your British literature folder corrected, it's a bonus 100. If you have rewritten something, let's say the Anglo-Saxon report you got an 85 on, but you went back and rewrote it, I will cross out the 85 and change it to a 95 or 100 or whatever it's now worth. So just pay attention to those things, because since we have so few hours a week of class, I'm not giving you in-class time to do this sort of stuff. Usually I would say, okay, everyone get out that assignment, and every sentence I have an X by, rewrite it, or, we do more in-class stuff, but I don't want to take time for that now. So those of you who are here, I think sometimes you don't remember that I'm also using Google Classroom. So please pay attention. Your last 2 assignments of this midterm are the definitions of words used in comedy. And I know that's a lot of them, but I actually crossed out about 7 or 8 of them. What? Yeah. That wasn't a complete list. It was really hard on me, because I thought, oh, I want to put that or this. And it's not even used for humorous dialogue so much. The words I chose are words that are actually used in literature and theater. And as you define them, I want you to kind of think of, if there's several definitions, which is most appropriate for literature. I think somebody handed this in. Was that you? Yeah. So some of them kind of overlap each other too. Oh, you wrote examples? Were they your own examples? Or were they ins?
No,
They were online? Okay. Yeah, so some of them like droll humor, or oh, you did yours in there? Yeah.
But only that I'm left-handed and I use a gel pen because I have no other pens.
That's
So
okay.
please
I can
pardon.
figure it out. I will. Or wry humor. Those are used pretty interchangeably. So, yeah, I'd like you to read several things and write down what makes sense to you. Like the word satire. Usually you think of something being satire, satirical, someone's humor satirical, but satire in literature is actually a type of writing with a purpose to change culture. It's like if Deborah was writing about some situations in Brownsville that she hoped would change. If she wanted to write an essay and make it satirical, she might use exaggeration, she might use um, mockery, she might use different things. But if her purpose is to change or improve a situation, that's satire. It's not really true satire unless you're hoping to make things better. So, like read through definitions and try to give me some insights that might help you. Okay, and here's one other thing you can include. Um, if you want to write like a little paragraph about what the English are famous for as far as their sense of humor, that would be fun too. The English are just notoriously um, twisted in their humor. Like there's things that they laugh at that I go, oh, if you ever watch any Monty Python, you will know. Or do you know who Mr. Bean is? Have you ever heard of Mr. Bean? Okay, that's English humor. I mean, it's sophomoric. Now, not always. Some of the greatest minds in the whole world have been English writers, and some of their humor is brilliantly subtle and amazing. But there is this branch of English humor that is just like, oh my goodness, I can't believe they said that.
Can we
It's kind of
quote something from Monty Python?
yes. Would you choose a selection and we'll watch it?
It's just that I have something, but
Yeah.
it is inappropriate.
Let's not make it too inappropriate.
Oh, it is
Why don't
too
you send me a link to it and let me see? I mean, there are things in Monty Python that I would not show. But people they're so funny. Like, some people like if it's funny even if it's sick. Like just a couple weeks ago, my pastor, who's a man of God, somehow Monty Python came up. I don't remember what it was, but he was talking about the scene where this man is having his arms cut off and his legs cut off. And I remember seeing that scene and leaving the room because I thought it was so terrible. And he was laughing. And then he told me another scene from something else where somebody actually is blown up as part of a comedy routine. And I told him, I said, Jimmy, how am I going to pray after you've described in detail this horrible scene? But to him, it was just like, it was so funny. He said, you ever see this scene? And I said, stop. So, it's very individual what people think is funny. That's why different people go to different comedy clubs and read different literature. We're unique that way. And it's not like one is evil and one is good. It's just my level of, comedy is kind of like, okay, I'm not going there. That's yucky for me. What, Diego?
There's this guy, when one of them is teaching the others kung fu.
Oh, yeah.
He just pulls out a gun.
Yeah, like things like that, like the shock of certain things can make him really funny, inappropriateness. So the reason I want you to do this is I realized when we were studying the Canterbury characters that you seem to have trouble sometimes with when Chaucer was being mocking in a positive way and when he was being critical and mocking in a disgusted way. And I just want us to look at some of that and kind of sharpen our insight because there's some things coming up like that. We have a couple satires we're going to read. Okay, so for the next week we're going to talk about King Arthur, and I'm going to put this on Google Classroom, and it will be for next week. But just to let you know, I want you to all watch at least an hour of some King Arthur movie and some King Arthur documentary.
Can you watch the Holy Grail?
Yeah, I'm going to allow that. If you can stand a musical, I would recommend Camelot because that's most true to one of the legends. But some people just can't stand it when actors start singing in the middle of a scene. So I sympathize, and it's definitely 60s and maybe too old-fashioned for you. But yeah, you could even watch Sword in the Stone, which is a Disney cartoon. It's really, pretty accurate to one of the versions of King Arthur. So the King Arthur legend, the reason it's so powerful is because it's so biblical. Every story that sort of captures us, every story about redemption and reaping what you sow, or even like the Pardoner's Tale, which we just read. You reap what you sow. Lust for money is a root of all sorts of evil. Like stories that capture us are all in some form in the Bible. They're all repeated, and all sorts of different versions of them spin out from the original story. Like even the mystery of the birth of King Arthur is very parallel to the King of Glory being born in a stable. The sword, the myths about swords. How many stories have swords or lightsabers? And the Bible is full of references to swords. Whether it's King David's righteous men in the pea patch holding their sword until the blood from their killing glues the sword to their hand, like that kind of sword, or whether it's the sword of the Spirit, the Word of God. Like the reason these stories are so gripping is because there is an element of truth and revelation in them. And I can enjoy a story without knowing it, but when I do know it, it's like, oh, wow, you're right. And I'll give you an example. We never took our kids to movies. We never had a TV. We were kind of like her family. We didn't homeschool, but practically, And when the first Star Wars came out way back, probably in 78, 79, everyone sees Star Wars. The first one of you all seen it? Yeah, okay. It's a classic. It's an oldie for you, but I wasn't going to go see it because I thought it's too violent for my little princes. That they might get scared. It has killing in it. But the guy who wanted us to go with him said, Gail, it's a futuristic King Arthur. And I said, what? He says it's King Arthur. Luke Skywalker, King Arthur, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Merlin, and Princess Leia, Guinevere. And he just went through a list of all these perils, lightsabers, Excalibur. I thought, okay, I'll go. And he was right. And one time I assigned to a class, we watched it for, might have been a slumber party. Anyhow, but I made a contest who could find the most parallels between King Arthur and Star Wars. And I think, someone got up into the 30s. It was just kind of amazing. So a lot of the stories, like if you're reading a story, you think, oh, this just captures me. Or seeing a movie that just like speaks to you. If you think about it, you realize it's a story of, forgiveness or redemption or transformation, or, there's some theme that has been loved in hundreds of stories and is first explained to us in the Word of God. There's so much value in knowing that. So if you get a chance, one of your documentaries, look at something about whether there really was a King Arthur, because that's very controversial. I have books and I have movies on that question. I personally think there was a Celtic king that unified quite a few tribes, and he had been influenced by the Romans. He was Romanized, and that he probably fought mostly the Saxons. So King Arthur is thought to have died about 525. So the Jutes and Saxons and Anglos first started coming at 449. So, it would have been in that century where our book says England was suffering its second wave of invasions. Oh, I only have 10 minutes. Okay, let's do this. Let me at least read you the introduction. And your assignment will be to read about Mallory. So page 69, just write this down someplace. You need to read page 69. So Sir Thomas Mallory is an amazing character, and he wrote this in jail. He was a very, very political person involved in all sorts of conspiracies and intrigue. On page 69, I want you to just read it and take some notes on it. I want you to know this man. So he's the first man who took dozens and dozens of legends and stories about Arthur, and he compiled them in a book called Mort de Arthur, which means the death of Arthur. So it tells his whole life, but kind of focuses on the fact that he died. And then in the 1800s, Sir Alfred Tennyson wrote a whole bunch of poems and a book called Idylls of the King. And he again took Mort de Arthur, written 600 years before, and all these new legends that had developed, and he combined them in a new presentation of the Arthurian legends. Okay, and then maybe 50, 60 years ago, a guy named White, T.H. White, I think it was, wrote a book called Once and Future Kings, Once and Future King. And it's where we get the Sword and the Stone. I mean, it has some magical stuff like talking owls that know history backwards, and it has some kind of comic parts. It's a beautiful story. I mean, I remember reading it and thinking, this isn't the King Arthur stories I grew up with, but this is still very, very profound. And then there are at least several hundred other books and movies and stories that have spun off from the Arthurian legend. And King Arthur is the single most famous name in England. You could ask someone, do you know anything about King Alfred? And then say, didn't he live a long time ago? Or, King George, isn't he the one that lost the colonies? Like there's other kings that are known, but this king they're not even sure about is the most famous king. Okay, so did you come for the lunch list? Yeah, I'm going to order something, so I hated to do it during my teaching, but I will do it. Okay. So go ahead and turn to page 70, please. Okay, I had to decide what does the dog want. And I'll read you the introduction. And then tomorrow I will read you the whole selection. So if you are here, you can just listen to it. If you're online, you will have to read it yourself. I was hoping to read it because it's kind of fun to read, but yes.
And in the homework you wrote yesterday, you put that we have to answer a question from page 74.
Right. So save that till after tomorrow. Then you don't have to read it yourself. Yeah, the questions from the end of this, those of you who are here, I'll read it to you and save you that reading, okay? Those of you who are at home, you'll have to read it because I'm not going to probably have this set up. Okay, so this is the little introduction. While there are no contemporary records to prove the truth of the Arthurian legends, the many ancient songs and stories celebrating the reign of Arthur suggest that such a man truly existed. However, although in his preface to Mort de Arthur, William Cacton offered to skeptics what he considered proof of Arthur's existence, the real King Arthur remains shrouded in mystery. Do you know what shrouded means? Yeah, covered, right, like kind of fogged in. And it can be assumed only that he was a Celtic or Celtic chieftain of the 6th century. Remember, 6th century means 500s, known for his wisdom and courage. Early sources indicate that King Arthur and his knights, Galahad, Gawain, and the others, were not originally the romantic figures that appear in Mallory's story. These heroes came into Norman music and songs from the 12th century poetic accounts. In these tales, Arthur and his Celtic earls were rough heroes in the epic tradition of Beowulf. As time passed, however, an enormous body of chivalric romance grew up around them, and the rude Celtic heroes became marvelously refined. So they used to be kind of like living in tents and wearing bear skins and stuff. And then they became these very kind of Elizabethan era men in silks and robes and living court lives. Every circumstance of their life was embellished with ceremony. Arthur's exploits were enlarged. A round table was established for his council, and to the circle of knights, a French knight was added, the renowned Lancelot. Morte Arthur was written in a time of transition. The feudal order was dying. By the time Mallory began writing his story, soldiers were fighting with gunpowder, a middle class of tradesmen was arising, and the practices of chivalry were being superseded by the new aristocracy or aristocratic code. Mallory, in a desire to escape the disorder and uneasiness of his day, tried to recapture lost ideals of the romantic past, as recounted in his tale of noble kings, adventurous knights, and damsels in distress. What's a damsel?
A lady.
A lady, yeah, right. Mallory's tales begins with the mysterious birth of Arthur and ends with his equally mysterious death. The central concern is with the adventures of Arthur and his famous Knights of the Round Table. So, do you know why it was a round table?
No, because in that sense, everyone was equal. There was
Right.
no higher seat, and
Right.
their opinion counted the same.
Right. Monarchy is always based on the king being higher. Thrones of kings are usually up on a platform or what's called a dais. And Arthur said, no, we are a brotherhood, sort of like Jesus and the disciples. You know, he joined in with them. He left his monarchy, his royal blood, and he joined them as a brother. A group dedicated to the ideal of moral and spiritual perfection, afforded by the union of the knightly code of courage and loyalty and the monastic code of chastity and purity. I'll print up for you the code of chivalry. I have one in the office and give it to you tomorrow. But it sounds very Christian. You know, it's very noble, very honoring, very kind, very merciful. Doing right, not letting your power ever become manipulative or controlling or injuring. You know, it's beautiful. It's what, we want people to be like. The knights might fight many battles and win much glory, all of which is credited to the name of King Arthur. Near the end of the story, however, the tide of good fortune turns. Lancelot falls in love with Arthur's queen, Guinevere, and the lady returns his love. One by one, the other knights become discontent, selfish, and disillusioned, thus weakening the kingdom. The kingdom is attacked by force under Sir Mordred, Arthur's treacherous nephew, and ultimately it goes down in defeat. Arthur is borne away on a barge by three mysterious ladies of Avonlea. So the Mordred is not really a nephew. Mordred is the illegitimate son of Arthur, who was seduced by his half sister, Morgan Le Fay, who is a witch and can transform her appearance. So apparently, Arthur had this one night relationship with this woman who he did not know was his sister. So it's a real dark thing, something he's very shameful about. And because Guinevere can't have children, it makes the tragedy of this one child even more dark, because is he the heir of the throne? And he's a very evil young man because he was raised by a witch. Morgan, yeah.
Well, in some stories, I read you also get to scabbard. It's a flavor you put before.
Yeah.
It's a magic one.
Yeah, and this actually is about the scabbard. This chapter, the one we're going to read, yeah, it's really interesting. As I said, there's three main versions of the legend, and all of those are gathering of hundreds of other, little stories and poems people have written. There's like 3 or 4 different stories about how he got Excalibur. Like whether the Lady of the Lake raised it up and he took a boat out, or whether it was given to him by Merlin, or, there's just a lot of spin-offs. And is his sword always Excalibur, or is that after his regular sword breaks? So, There's a lot of stories. If you took some time and watched like First Night and Excalibur and Camelot, each one of them has a different version of Excalibur. In the following account, young Arthur, guided by his faithful companion Merlin, who is Obi-Wan Kenobi basically, the court magician, and the stories of the magicians are interesting too. Are they more like druid priests, or are they more like Christian priests with a lot of supernatural, power? They're probably more pagan. Okay, Merlin is a pagan priest. He receives his sword Excalibur from the Lady of the Lake. Because the various legends of King Arthur arose at different points in time, it is not unusual to find many contradictory episodes in Mallory's story. For example, elsewhere in Morte Arthur, Arthur receives his sword as a boy when one day he pulls it from a block of stone, thus proving his right to rule England. And that's probably the more powerful story. He originally gets it out of a stone. Merlin has magically put it there because he is the true son of Uther Pendragon, who was the true king of England. But Uther Pendragon had the ability to change his appearance with the help of Merlin and went to a lady he desired, kind of like King David and Bathsheba, transformed himself into the woman's husband, Ingrid's husband, and that's how Arthur was conceived. So both of these stories are filled with magic and immoral relationships. The following section, told in Mallory's simple and distinctive prose, though modernized in spelling, relates an incident that occurred when Arthur was a young man and still in the initial stage of proving himself the epitome of the chivalric ideal. Remember what epitome means? I think I told you back with Beowulf. What? Peak, the perfect example, the epitome, right? Good word. The aura of romance and mystery that is so characteristic of the medieval period is in full evidence here. Okay, so tomorrow I'll read you this selection. I'm going to go ahead and give you a divider for your folder and a summary of the Arthur legend, which I would like for you to read. Okay, Mr. Kriegel, you can turn that off. That's kind of the only part I wanted the kids to get. Okay. I may have